Doubt or peace? Uncertainty or confidence? It's interesting, isn't it, how uncertainty breeds doubt and then it just spills into more, whereas certainty breeds peace and it just builds into more. Which side of that coin are you on as you think about Jesus and his Easter message? Well, if you are full of fear, doubt, guilt, grief, shame, some combination of that dominating today, you have plenty of company, not just in the world today, but also in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago as Jesus' very own disciples were full of guilt, shame, fear, doubt, and grief. They were full of guilt and shame because Jesus had told them, you're going to fall away from me, you're going to abandon me, but they didn't listen to him and they definitely didn't think about his words and take his warning to heart. They relied on their own self-power, their own courage that they could drum up from within themselves, and they all fell and abandoned Jesus when he needed them the most. They were full of grief simply because their loved one, Jesus, had died, and it shouldn't have been a surprise because he had told them about it, but it was. And so they were spilling all over into grief, which any of us would have been. They were also then bleeding into fear because they heard the taunts, they heard the ridicule, they heard the strong message from all of those enemies at the cross, come down from the cross if you're the Son of God, and the clear implication was, but you can't come down from the cross because you're not the Son of God. And they started to believe that, which means they started to doubt Jesus' own words. Easter evening, Jesus appeared behind locked doors to 10 of his disciples. Judas was gone by now, having killed himself on Friday, and Thomas was not with them. The first words out of the Christ's mouth were, "Peace be with you." The disciples had certainty. Jesus had risen. He had died, but had risen. Their sins were paid in full. Heaven was their home. He had done everything he had said he would do. The scriptures were fulfilled. And now he was sending them out to the world, a lost, confused, terrified, doubting world, to be Christ's ambassadors. They went and found Thomas and told him what they had seen and what they had heard. But Thomas could really be a poster child for a lot of people of today. No matter how many times people told him Jesus had risen, no matter who had seen him or what details they could provide, Thomas didn't believe it. He had to see for himself. He was entrenched in his personal opinion as though he knew more than all of them and he knew more than God. And his personal opinion was, I need more evidence. I will not believe it unless. And then he had set up some conditions that he thought were impossible to reach. He said, unless I see the nail marks and touch them with my own hands, and unless I shove my hand into that hole in his side where the spear was, I will not believe it. Thomas wasn't struggling with doubt. He simply was doubt. But then Jesus appeared to him too as he was in the locked room with the disciples. And listen for how Jesus, who knows everything, fulfilled Thomas's seemingly impossible conditions. John chapter 20, verse 26. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus' truth pushed away the fears, grief, shame, guilt of the disciples, as well as even Thomas, who is so hardened in the opposite. Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." His heart was all in now on what Jesus was saying and what he had been saying about Jesus to himself. Thomas was all in on Jesus coming to give him a peaceful conscience, instead of him drumming up all of the details about how he had let Jesus down and the guilt that would otherwise crush him. Peace in Christ led to certainty. Peace in Christ led to squeezing away fear. Peace in Christ crushed Thomas's guilt. Peace in Christ destroyed Thomas's doubt. And as all the disciples began to take this gospel to the ends of the earth, Thomas himself went all the way to India. He actually was a pretty courageous guy, and he took peace in Christ to those who did not have peace. He took peace in Christ to those who otherwise would be lost and condemned. You can do that too. The present is more important than the past. It always will be. Instead of thinking, I know more than God, instead of setting up conditions as to what God supposedly must do before you believe, just listen. Listen to what Jesus has to say. Listen to Jesus' words which bring peace, certainty, squeezing away doubts and fears, pushing away shame and guilt, and instead living in the Easter joy, the confidence of knowing, I'm a stranger here on earth, but heaven is my home. That's the crown jewel Jesus offers me. Live in that peace Easter offers.